Pola stripped away her master's grimy, worn-out clothing and gently helped him into a fresh shirt. As she turned around after dressing him, she found herself face-to-face with a black pistol pointed directly at her. But strangely, fear didn't cross her mind. Instead, she pleaded with desperation, asking him to pull the trigger and end her life. She was the 10th maid assigned to care for Count Vincent Bonita. Pola couldn't stand her own reflection. Her face, marked with an unsightly birthmark, was a reminder of everything she hated. Born in a filthy stable to parents who offered no love, her life began in the slums. Her mother had named her Pola, meaning flying dust, and it felt accurate. Her existence was just as forgotten and fleeting. Her father was a violent drunk, and when her mother could no longer take the abuse, she vanished, leaving behind 5 helpless children. The neighbors whispered constantly, wondering how long any of them could survive. Her youngest sibling died first. Not long after birth, the second sister was sold off. Pola saw her once more when she returned, begging for help, her small body completely covered in bruises and cuts. Their father dragged her back without a shred of concern. Not long after, word came that the second sister had succumbed to an illness and had been left to die alone in the streets. But everyone believed she'd been beaten to death. Then, Pola's 4th sister died in her arms. There was no funeral, no proper grave, just a small, nameless mound of earth she dug herself. She overheard people saying it was a miracle she was still alive. That ugly face of hers saved her, they said. If she were prettier, she'd have ended up like her sisters. Was that supposed to be a blessing? She had never had a proper meal. Her 3 siblings had perished, each one a victim of misery and cruelty. All she had left was a monstrous father and a 3rd sister who constantly ridiculed her. If there was such a thing as hell, Pola believed she had been born into it. Then, one day, a nobleman arrived. "I'd like to hire your daughter," he said. Just like that, Pola was sold off, treated like an object. Her father, thrilled with the money, couldn't stop smiling. Her 3rd sister only waved mockingly. "Goodbye, sister. Don't ever come back," but to Pola it felt like an escape. For the first time, she was leaving the cage she'd always known. She arrived at the grand estate of the Bonita family, where her new master awaited, Vincent Bonita. She was warned to keep everything she witnessed a secret or face punishment. When the doors opened, she felt like she was staring at a mythical creature. The man inside seemed to glow in the sunlight, wrapped tightly in his sheets like a frightened child. A teacup crashed to the ground, shattering beside her feet. The head maid bowed calmly, while Vincent curled further into his blanket. It was time for his meal. The food had been specially prepared so he could eat easily. But Vincent only shouted for them to leave. A vase came flying across the room. Before Pola could grasp what was happening, the head maid quickly introduced her to him and said to call if he needed anything. Vincent cursed and screamed for them to go. Unfazed, the head maid simply said she'd return later with dinner. In that moment, Vincent suddenly pulled out a knife. Fearing she might lose her job already, Pola rushed toward him, trying to keep him from harming himself. But she hadn't noticed the sheets on the floor. She tripped and fell, and when she opened her eyes, he was above her, sweat dripping from his face. His expression was impossible to describe. Pola had never seen someone so painfully beautiful. But something was clearly wrong. His body trembled like he was terrified of something. As his hand moved toward her face, she instinctively pushed him away. The head maid ran over immediately. Vincent was gasping, struggling to breathe. It hit Pola all at once. He couldn't see. That's why his movements were so wild and unpredictable. That's why his hands reached out blindly. Suddenly, he began shouting and throwing whatever he could grab, wrecking everything in his reach. Vincent Bonita was the only child of the powerful Count and Countess Baronita. Ever since childhood, people praised his looks and admired his intelligence. When his parents died in a tragic accident, many doubted he could handle the family legacy. But against all odds, he brought honor and prosperity to the Baronita name. But that joy didn't last. At a royal banquet, he was poisoned by an assassin. It started with pain in his eyes. Then came the blurry vision. Eventually, he lost his sight completely. From then on, he locked himself away, refusing to be seen. Most believed he was recovering from an injury, but only a few knew the truth. To preserve the secret, only Pola was allowed to serve him. He spent his days lashing out, tossing things around, and yelling at anyone who came near. Despite this, Pola continued doing her job. She would place the food down carefully every day, only to hear him scream for her to take it away. But she couldn't stop. His health was declining. His clothes were filthy, unchanged for who knew how long. In a monotone voice, she reminded him that he needed to bathe and change his sheets. She spoke gently but firmly. He snapped, accusing her of being dissatisfied with him. He shouted again, telling her to get out. She calmly responded, asking what she could do to improve. He said he hated everything about her. Quietly, she placed the tray down. She told him she would keep trying her best to meet his expectations. But he dismissed her again, demanding she disappear. For a moment, she felt the urge to punch him. He always hurled dangerous objects without care. Maybe, she thought, if she accidentally hit him once, could she get away with it? Pola had only wanted to let out her frustration, just once. But even though Vincent was blind, his instincts were sharp. Sensing her shift in energy, he snapped in her direction, his voice firm and threatening. He warned her not to come any closer, claiming he would kill her if she tried. Pola responded with a calm smile. She quietly assured him that she wasn't thinking anything dangerous, she simply wanted to help him change the bed sheets. She asked him to shift aside. But no sooner had the words left her mouth than another object came flying, this one hitting her with painful precision. Her vision blurred. For a split second, she saw the face of her violent father, as if summoned by the blow. A broken clock lay at her feet. She picked it up slowly. The glass had shattered, but the hands still moved stubbornly forward. Just like her life, cracked and fragile, but still ticking. Her sister's cruel voice echoed in her mind, a memory from long ago. Pola had been mocked for her appearance, called hideous, scolded for stepping outside with her face uncovered. Her own family had treated her like something shameful. Her anger simmered, but then slowly settled into a cold, heavy calm. Vincent lashed out again with cruel words, accusing her of being just another desperate soul who'd do anything for money. He insisted that she was no better than a beggar, someone who accepted any offer just to survive. His words were cutting but undeniable. He continued, bitter and harsh. He told her that no one had hired her because she was skilled or trustworthy. It was simply because her life was expendable. If she died in the mansion, it wouldn't matter to anyone. Vincent used blame as a shield, trying to protect his pride by tearing others down. Pola recognized this defense. She knew the kind of pain that made people cruel. His insults no longer stung, but that didn't mean they didn't hurt. She wondered to herself how someone like him, supposedly noble, could live in such filth and misery. Yet even in his disheveled state, he was still proud, still clinging to the title of a master. Flushed with embarrassment, Vincent tried to silence her. But Pola's next words struck deeper than anything she had said before. She admitted it. Yes, she did desire money. Yes, she was the kind of person whose death wouldn't make headlines. So, if he truly wanted to kill her, he might as well do it. She told him plainly that if he couldn't stand her, he should just end it quickly. Then, without waiting for permission, she stepped forward and yanked the sheet from underneath him. The proud and guarded Vincent fell to the floor, stunned and speechless. When he demanded to know what she was doing, she replied with composure, she was changing the sheets. Without hesitation, she walked to him and began unbuttoning his shirt. Vincent tried to pull away, warning her not to touch him, but she firmly pulled him back. She questioned what made his body so special that she couldn't see it. He couldn't see her, but he could feel her breath on his skin. He tried again to push her away, but after days of not eating, he was too weak to resist. His shirt came off with little effort. Pola had succeeded in getting him halfway cleaned, but when she looked down at his bare body, the smile on her face faded. His condition was worse than she'd imagined. Deep scratch marks lined his arms where his nails had dug into his own skin. His frame was tall, but his body was painfully thin. Bones jutted out under his skin, and injuries, some fresh, others long healed, were scattered all over. She remembered once asking the head maid why there were so many fragile items left in his room. Wouldn't it be safer to remove them? The maid had paused before answering that it was better to leave them. If he broke everything, they'd replace it. Because when there was nothing left to destroy, Vincent would turn the violence inward. Gently, Pola took his trembling hands in her own. She touched his sunken cheek softly, not with judgment, but with quiet sympathy. Gradually, he began to calm down. She placed a clean set of clothes in front of him so he could dress himself, and used the opportunity to finish making the bed. Just as she smoothed the last corner of the sheet, Vincent rushed back to the bed and climbed on quickly. He panicked at how fast everything had happened. But on the floor, the clean underwear and trousers still lay untouched. Pola noticed and looked at him. He hadn't changed them. She quietly mentioned it. But his only answer was cold and sharp. He told her to get out. She opened her mouth to insist again, to tell him he couldn't leave the undergarments unchanged. But before she could say a word, he whipped off the sheet and pointed a gun straight at her. One more word, and he said he'd kill her. But Pola understood. The gun wasn't really meant to harm, it was to guard his pride. Even blind, he held onto his defenses however he could. From that day onward, any time Vincent felt trapped or threatened, he'd reach for that weapon. Sometimes he waved it in the wrong direction. Other times, he aimed with terrifying accuracy, right between her eyes. Their standoffs became a routine. But Vincent's worst enemy was not her, it was himself. Each night, he would sit at the edge of the bed, curling in on himself, holding the gun tightly. And every night, he would point it at his own head and pull the trigger again and again. Vincent hadn't always been like this. Even after losing his sight, he had managed to live with some degree of normalcy. But things had changed after a series of horrifying events. The first had happened during a routine inspection in a village. A boy, young and unassuming, had stabbed Vincent in the chest. The child took his own life immediately after being caught. The second happened in the mansion's garden. A servant had left briefly, and when he returned, he found Vincent bloodied, standing beside a man who had been killed, an iron rod driven through his chest. The third time was during a meal. The fourth, in one of the mansion's long corridors. One attempt after another, Vincent had narrowly escaped death. It shattered him. He no longer felt safe, not even in the home he'd grown up in. And if word got out that he was blind, his authority as head of the family would be questioned. Everything he had built could collapse. That fear consumed him, swallowing the last of his stability. He didn't just lose his sight, he lost his sense of safety, his trust, and eventually, his will to live. And Pola heard it all, every night. Her room was separated from his by only a wall. On the other side, night after night, she could hear the cries and groans of a man silently fighting death. Even in the darkest hours, he battled against the thing that terrified him most, being powerless. No matter how dark the nights were, the sun continued to rise every morning. As always, Pola got herself ready and prepared to care for her master. Every 10 days, the butler would report directly to Vincent. Pola often stood outside the door, quietly watching from the shadows. What she saw always surprised her. The man who lived in constant fear, who lashed out blindly in rage, suddenly seemed like someone else during those moments. Calm, dignified, and composed, he carried himself like a proper nobleman. She wondered if this was the real Vincent, the person he used to be before everything fell apart. But then, the butler's eyes met hers. The way he looked at her, so cold, so lifeless, made her skin crawl. It was the look someone might give a corpse. Suddenly, she remembered the rumors whispered about this estate, and the cruel things her master had once said. She reminded herself she had to stay sharp. One mistake could cost her life. Once again, Pola pulled the bed sheets from her master's bed. And, just like before, Vincent instinctively grabbed his gun. He told her to stop, to leave him alone. But this time, she didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly told herself that if this continued, she'd die a slow death right alongside him. Better to die by his hand than waste away in this place. So she challenged him to go ahead and pull the trigger. To her, that would be mercy. Vincent stared at her in shock, unsure if she was serious or just mad. But when he didn't act, she yanked the sheets away without hesitation. Losing that small piece of comfort, Vincent panicked and raised the weapon again. But Pola didn't back down. She flipped the bed and threw him off balance with sheer force. Dinner was ready, and she was determined to feed him. Vincent sat up, red with anger and embarrassment. He accused her of trying to provoke him, of wanting to be killed. But Pola remained expressionless. She calmly reminded him that he couldn't see her. So how could he possibly hit her? She picked up a spoonful of rice porridge and, pretending to be amazed, asked him to speak clearly so she could feed him properly. Vincent let out a bitter laugh, unable to contain his fury. With one swift kick, he overturned the dinner tray. Plates scattered across the floor. Pola just stood there, watching the food roll away. It reminded her of the past, how she used to be beaten for hours just to get one mouthful of rice like that. But even knowing Vincent's past, she couldn't bring herself to pity him. He lived in a mansion, born into privilege. She had no right to feel sorry for someone who once had everything. In her mind, she imagined him trembling in fear. He was so afraid he couldn't even take a single bite of soup. As she moved around the bed to retrieve the spilled food, Vincent's anxiety spiked. He began shouting, asking what she was doing. She didn't answer. Instead, she pinned him down on the bed. To keep him from escaping, she even sat on top of him. Though she was small, she pressed down with everything she had. Vincent, startled and panicked, opened his mouth as if to scream. But just as he did, something warm slipped between his lips. For a moment, he froze. Then came another spoonful. Her soft voice reminded him that food should never be wasted. Only then did Vincent begin to resist. He tried to touch her face, to push her away, but Pola grabbed his hair and held him still. She fed him slowly, one spoon at a time, asking if no one had ever taught him how to eat properly. Eventually, he snapped. Furious, he shoved her off the bed. Soup dribbled from the corner of his mouth. His throat must have burned from swallowing too quickly. He shouted that she was fired. But Pola remained calm, unfazed by the outburst. She reminded him she was simply doing her job, feeding her master. He shouted again, accusing her of wanting to die. Pola's face darkened. She reminded him that no one had witnessed what happened. No one else was in the room. Just the two of them. She brushed dust off her clothes and asked how anyone could possibly know what she did. Vincent started groping around the bed, searching. She guessed he was looking for his gun. She asked if he really intended to kill her, then questioned if the gun even had any bullets left. In his frantic state, Vincent accidentally knocked the weapon to the floor. The moment it left his hand, panic filled his expression. Pola just smiled and stepped away, satisfied. Before leaving, she said she hoped their next mealtime would be just as enjoyable. Hearing her suggest there would be a next time, Vincent shouted at her again, yelling that she was fired. But Pola didn't care. She casually mentioned the rumors she'd heard, how it was nearly impossible to find a servant willing to care for him. She told him not to worry. She would stay with him until a replacement was found. And if no one came, she would remain with him forever. Then, without hesitation, she picked up the fallen gun and placed it in his hands, aiming the barrel at herself. She asked him to take care of her from now on. Vincent was overwhelmed. He couldn't believe her brazenness. But Pola felt victorious. She had won this round. In the days that followed, their battles continued. Neither side gave in. Vincent kept overturning food trays and smashing objects. Pola, meanwhile, kept feeding him, changing his clothes, and now had a new mission, getting him to bathe. Vincent reacted like a furious cat every time she tried. He hissed, resisted, and fought. One time, her nose even took the damage. But then, something changed. The head maid quietly informed Pola that she had passed the test. As long as she didn't harm Vincent's body, she could serve him however she saw fit. That meant she had survived. She was officially accepted as his caretaker. With renewed energy, Pola entered his room one evening holding a pillow like a weapon and declared her challenge. She warned him that she wouldn't lose, then reminded him he needed to bathe. But this time, the room remained silent. No objects came flying toward her. Curious, she peeked around the corner. Vincent was curled up on the bed, his body trembling. Alarmed, Pola rushed to his side. His face was twisted in pain, his whole body shaking like a fish gasping for air on dry land. She immediately understood. It was happening again. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a breathing aid the doctor had given her for moments like this. She held it to his lips and spoke softly, guiding him to match her breathing. She reassured him that everything was going to be okay, that she was there, that he wasn't alone. Gradually, his breath began to slow. His body relaxed, and Pola stayed by his side, gently patting his back, repeating comforting words. In the past, he had believed she might one day kill him. But now, time and time again, it was her presence that pulled him back from the edge. She, who once seemed like a threat, had become the one person who kept him alive. With each passing day alongside Pola, Vincent began to regain fragments of his lost energy. He no longer seemed like a lifeless shell. Still, the fact that someone had seen him at his weakest left him feeling exposed and ashamed, especially before Pola. So once again, he told her to leave. But she didn't go. Instead, she reminded him that he needed to eat. Vincent responded by stubbornly curling himself up under the sheets like a child, trying to block her out completely. She chuckled softly, pointing out that he couldn't even breathe like that. Besides, she hadn't even brought the food yet. She kept talking, rambling casually about how the doctor had instructed him to eat on time and move his body more if he wanted to stay healthy. But when her words got no response, she sighed and decided to sweep the floor instead. As she moved around cleaning, the soft rhythm of her broom caught Vincent's attention. Curious, he peeked out from under the covers. Watching her move so easily and talk so freely stirred something in him. She had a strange energy, one he couldn't quite understand. And then, unexpectedly, he asked her something. He wanted to know why she had come to this place. Pola was caught off guard. It was the first time her master had spoken to her without shouting. She hesitated, unsure how to answer. But Vincent's voice quickly turned cold again. He repeated the question, this time more forcefully. She finally told him the truth, that she had come because she needed money. Vincent coldly offered her money in exchange for leaving. It was clear he was trying a softer tactic after all his previous harshness had failed. But Pola refused to go. She explained that even if she left, others would be sent to replace her. Vincent snapped that he'd get rid of them too. But she reminded him that no matter what he did, more maids would continue to arrive. That meant she wasn't going anywhere. Then he asked her another question. Where she had been living before she came to the mansion. Pola replied that she had been in her hometown, Felton. Vincent noted that it sounded far away. She smiled faintly and said it wasn't really that far, just beyond a single mountain. What truly made the journey feel special, though, was how magical the outside world had seemed to her. Pola had never left her village before. To her, this place was like stepping into a fairy tale. Vincent scoffed. He thought she was being foolish. This place, he told her, wasn't a land for daydreams. She lowered her eyes and quietly agreed. She knew reality wasn't like a storybook, but she had allowed herself a brief dream, just once. Vincent mocked her for it. He accused her of being too fond of fantasies. But she asked gently if he had to be so harsh. For her, even just reading fairy tales was enough to feel like dreaming. She shared a small memory, how she had once worked in a bookstore when she was little. The owner had let her read sometimes, and there was a quote she still remembered. God created you. Your existence is a blessing. Love with all your heart, and let that love shape your journey. It was from a book called The Sorrow of Love. Vincent recognized the title and remarked that even children had read it. He added that her taste in books was awful. It was a tragedy, after all. Pola didn't argue. She admitted the story had a sad ending, but she still liked it. Then she turned the conversation to him. She wanted to know if he had a favorite book. Vincent said he didn't read. He couldn't, after all, not anymore. And even the thought of someone reading to him made him feel exposed. He didn't want the world to know he was blind. Pola knew he was just putting up walls. So she made up her mind. She would read to him herself. Of course, she had to half-drag a reluctant agreement out of him. Then, clearing her throat, she began reading aloud. Barely a few words in, Vincent interrupted her. He said it was boring and demanded a different book. She switched to a second one. He stopped her again. Then a third. And then a fourth. Each time, he complained they were dull and worthless. She finally lost her patience and asked why he was being like this. He replied coldly that boring stories were boring, he was only being honest. Furious, Pola asked what standard he was using to judge these books. Vincent's expression turned icy. He reminded her she was just a maid. How dare she question him? It was cruel, using his status to silence her. So she challenged him to name what kind of book he liked. But all he said was, whatever. That answer pushed her to the edge. She clenched her jaw and tried to calm down. Vincent noticed her silence and began calling for her again, acting like a spoiled child. He told her to hurry up and bring another book. She felt completely worn out. That whole day had been an endless tug-of-war. Later that night, just as Pola was settling down to rest, a loud crash came from the next room. She jumped up and ran over to check on him. Vincent had just woken from a long, terrible dream. His body was trembling. Pola approached him gently, her voice soft and steady. She reminded him that it was just a dream and told him to go back to sleep. Vincent admitted quietly that he didn't think he could. So she promised to stay with him until he calmed down. As she turned to leave, his hand shot out and grabbed her. He wanted to know where she was going. She replied that she was going back to her room. He frowned. Hadn't she just said she would stay until he felt calm again? She looked at him, puzzled, and said that he seemed calm now. Vincent began muttering to himself. He wished someone could always stay by his side. He felt anxious, afraid, never at peace. Pola guessed he was only saying all this to keep her from leaving. But then his voice softened. He asked her to stay until he fell asleep. She wasn't good at refusing when people asked like that. So she sat down beside him. Slowly, Vincent closed his eyes. As their hands gently touched, sleep finally began to take over his weary body. The next morning, Pola yawned. The night had been long and tiring, but there was no rest for her. She had to keep going. She had promised to read again today. Carrying more books than the day before, she returned to his room. Vincent, still sensitive to noise, grumbled that she was persistent. She responded with a bright smile, saying it was her job to serve him, after all. Then she invited him to listen carefully this time. This time, she began reading fairy tales. And she read them loudly. Vincent flinched, asking what nonsense she was reading now. He recognized it as a children's story. She calmly explained that fairy tales were perfect for him, especially someone as sensitive and grumpy as he was. These stories could soothe the soul. She braced herself, waiting for something to be thrown. But instead, Vincent let out a long sigh and told her to continue. Surprised, Pola stood still. He repeated himself, louder this time. He wanted her to go on. So she began reading once more. But soon, he stopped her again. This time, he said she was reading too fast. Then he criticized her pronunciation. He told her to start over, this time reading clearly and slowly so that he could picture the scenes in his mind. And once again, he questioned her ability. Pola was close to breaking down. Who would have thought that simply reading aloud to someone could be this exhausting? Vincent, ever the demanding and difficult listener, kept making her repeat chapters, never satisfied. But Pola wasn't someone who gave up easily. She straightened her back and kept going. Days passed like this, quiet, tense, yet filled with a strange routine. Pola spent her time searching for more books to read to her master. Vincent, surprisingly, had stopped throwing tantrums. He listened, even if he didn't always admit it. One day, while glancing into the mirror, Pola saw a reflection she barely recognized. Once, her face had been covered in bruises that seemed like they'd never heal. Now, when she brushed her bangs aside, her forehead was clear. The headmaid called out to her just then, handing her a new task. Pola was to sort through the master's letters. Most were formal greetings and invitations. As she began organizing them, she noticed one curious envelope. It was signed simply with a first name, Violet. The headmaid took that one back immediately, explaining that letters from that person were to be kept separate and never delivered to the master. Among the rest, there was one letter that stood out. It had golden handwriting, elegant and striking. The headmaid recognized it right away and assigned Pola another duty, write a reply to it. It didn't have to be anything specific, just something polite. This left Pola stunned. Could nobles really respond to letters so casually? Still, she took her job seriously and brought the letter over to the desk, carefully trying to write her first formal reply. What she didn't know then was that she'd soon meet the person who had written that very letter, and that encounter would change everything. A brown-haired man soon arrived, speaking Vincent's name with familiarity. He was an old friend. This guest was polite, charming, and quick with jokes, but far too playful, especially with her. She was munching on a roasted potato when he approached, catching her mid-bite. He asked casually about Vincent's mood, wondering aloud if the Vincent was angry. Pola, her mouth still full, managed to shake her head and say that her master wasn't all that angry. But the guest was confused. He'd heard that Vincent was still throwing things. Pola explained that he had always been like that. Wasn't that dangerous? She was asked. But this question felt like a trap. So instead of answering, she just kept chewing. The guest, who introduced himself as Ethan, pressed further. He asked whether she, as the maid, knew about Vincent's current condition. Pola nearly choked again. She didn't understand why someone like him was questioning a maid like her so persistently. He teased that Vincent must have given her a hard time. Pola quickly denied it, saying that her master had always been kind. But Ethan pointed out that she had just admitted Vincent often threw objects at people. Once again, she found herself caught in his clever wordplay. Pola tried to keep her thoughts to herself, silently warning herself not to get drawn in by Ethan's charm. He told her how Vincent had suddenly stopped replying to letters months ago and wouldn't meet anyone, not even trusted friends. That silence had worried him so much, he decided to come visit in person. Would Vincent ever return to his old self? Pola answered softly. Her master was trying. The fear of losing sight and being plunged into total darkness was terrifying beyond imagination. And someone who hadn't experienced it firsthand, like Ethan, couldn't truly understand that pain. Sometimes silence said more than words. Ethan, impressed by her insight, remarked that she was much calmer and wiser than he'd expected. There was a gentleness to her too. But he didn't want to wait forever. He had something important to tell Vincent. Couldn't he rely on her help? Pola quietly shook her head. She was just a maid, the weakest person in the mansion. Ethan, not discouraged, asked if knocking on the door 100 times would make Vincent finally open it. He even joked that if Pola fell for him, maybe things would get easier. But she shut that down immediately. No chance. That only made him laugh harder. Later, maid Renee, one of the few people Pola saw regularly, stopped by with news and items from the main house. She gushed about Ethan, the second son of the Kristoff family. Handsome, kind, well-mannered. Everyone liked him. She even confessed she was jealous of Pola for being near him. Pola pointed out that he was staying in the annex. Couldn't anyone go speak to him? Renee shook her head. The annex was strictly off-limits. Only authorized servants could enter, and only during specific hours. Anyone who broke the rules could be severely punished. Pola finally understood why this part of the estate felt so deserted. It seemed this guest held a truly special position. Meanwhile, Ethan had started to grow impatient. He leaned against Vincent's door, wondering aloud if staying there all night would eventually force Vincent to respond. But morning came, and the door stayed closed. He muttered that he thought Vincent would get angry enough to yell or open up. Clearly, he had been wrong. It turned out that Vincent wasn't the only one who was stubborn. Ethan had his own streak too. Pola, watching this from nearby, pulled out a key from her pocket and offered to open the door. Ethan reminded her that she had refused just yesterday. She explained calmly that she was only unlocking it to change the bedding. If Ethan happened to sneak in during that time, that would be his doing. But whether Vincent would believe that excuse was another matter. Ethan said it would bother his conscience, so he declined her help and insisted he would keep trying on his own. So Pola turned to do her duty, warning him not to follow. She slid the key into the lock and opened the door. As soon as she stepped inside, something felt off. The bed was empty. Alarmed, she moved closer and found Vincent collapsed on the floor. He was in pain, his body trembling. It turned out that the master's fragile stomach couldn't even handle a few extra spoonfuls of soup. He had vomited, overwhelmed by indigestion. To Pola, it was hard to believe someone with such a small appetite, like a baby bird, could suffer so much just from eating. He was far too weak. Before leaving, the doctor had already warned her to care for him with extra caution. Now she understood why. Thanks to that unexpected incident, Ethan finally had a chance to see Vincent in person. His face turned serious the moment he saw how thin and pale Vincent had become. It was clear he hadn't been taking care of himself. Ethan's eyes filled with concern as he quietly took in his friend's weakened state. Vincent, however, showed no warmth in return. He coldly told Ethan to leave. Ethan didn't back down. He gently encouraged Vincent to step outside for a change. He even offered to help him however he could. But Vincent scoffed at the idea. Help? Unless Ethan could restore his eyesight, what help could he possibly offer? Frustrated, Ethan asked how long Vincent planned to live like this. Rumors were already spreading outside the estate, whispers that Vincent wasn't recovering from party wounds, but was instead hiding due to some terrible, incurable condition. Vincent's voice grew bitter. What did Ethan expect him to do? Show his face and get himself killed? He reminded Ethan that if word got out that Count Baronita had gone blind, it wouldn't be hired assassins knocking at his door next time. It would be the very person responsible for his condition, coming to finish the job. But Ethan pushed back. Whoever had hurt him most likely already knew the truth. Continuing to live in hiding wouldn't change that. If things stayed this way, Ethan warned, he would be forced to reveal Vincent's condition to the public himself. Vincent was furious and shouted that Ethan was out of his mind. Maybe so, Ethan admitted. But he cared about Vincent deeply, and he couldn't bear to watch his friend waste away like this. Secrets wouldn't protect him forever. They had to think about the future. Vincent remained stubborn, brushing it off as nonsense. But Ethan's tone turned icy. Whether it was nonsense or not, time would tell. The choice to act was now Vincent's. Caught between the two men, Paula felt uneasy. She told Ethan that if he really wanted answers, he should speak to Vincent directly. Ethan remained polite, saying he'd be thankful if Paula could share anything that might help. Before leaving, he gave Vincent an ultimatum. He had 2 days to come out of his room. If not, Ethan would take matters into his own hands. Paula, frustrated by the exchange, asked whether forcing someone to act against their will wasn't the same as a threat. Ethan didn't deny it. In fact, he admitted it was one. Paula silently labeled him a villain in her mind. But Ethan seemed to catch her expression and responded calmly. He insisted he wasn't a bad person. If anything, he was just as pained by Vincent's downfall as anyone else. Their bond had started because of their family's interests, long before they had even become friends. He pleaded with Paula to try gently persuading Vincent to come out. After Paula finished tidying Vincent's room, she carried out a bucket and was once again trailed by Ethan, who seemed endlessly curious. He asked her what she was doing, and she replied that she was choosing a new book to read to Vincent. Ethan was shocked. He couldn't believe that Vincent was actually letting someone read to him. And not just any book, fairy tales. Paula told him that although Vincent had refused at first, he eventually listened quietly. She now wanted to pick something more substantial. Ethan couldn't stop himself from laughing. The image of proud, irritable Vincent listening obediently to fairy tales was simply too ridiculous to imagine. His laughter echoed through the library. Meanwhile, Vincent, alone in his room, was waiting for Paula to return and continue reading. The distant sound of laughter irritated him. Unbeknownst to Ethan, Vincent's real reason for avoiding him was tied to the Kristoff family, the very ones who had caused everything. Ethan had his suspicions, but seeing Vincent's condition, he held back from asking directly. Later, when Vincent ended their conversation with a cryptic warning, Paula understood. He told her that some things were secrets for a reason, and if she valued her life, she should stop being curious. From that day forward, the subject never came up again. Their routine resumed. Paula woke him up each morning, and Vincent continued resisting her efforts in his usual stubborn way. She reminded him he had sweated during the night and should bathe first. Though bluntness no longer worked, Vincent had learned to politely ask her to leave when he didn't want help. Still, after a small struggle, he usually gave in. One morning, he waved her off, saying he'd manage alone. She hesitated at the door, concerned, until he nodded and began unbuttoning his shirt. In truth, Vincent had gained some weight recently. His wounds were healing well, and his body looked much healthier. Paula took quiet pride in the thought that her care had made a difference. Vincent, annoyed she hadn't left yet, scolded her again. Only once she heard the sound of water running from the bathroom did Paula finally feel at ease. There had been real change. Vincent had begun eating properly, and the head chef was overwhelmed with joy when he saw empty dishes returning from his room. Even the strict maid had offered rare praise. Thanks to Vincent's improved condition, Paula had more free time lately. The sun was shining, the air was warm. It felt like a perfect day to go outside. Her thoughts drifted back to that letter with golden writing. She decided she would bring Vincent outside for tea in the courtyard. But Vincent wasn't having it. He immediately dismissed the idea as foolish. Paula gently insisted that fresh air was good for his health, and she had already chosen a quiet, private spot. Vincent questioned how he was even supposed to get there. Without hesitation, Paula said she would carry him. Both of them regretted that decision soon after. Paula's legs shook as she half-dragged the tall man across the grounds. Vincent tried to call it off and go back inside, but she managed to drop him into a chair before he could say another word. They had arrived. It was the back courtyard, a quiet, abandoned spot with a forgotten table. She had cleaned it herself. Vincent sat quietly, soaking in the scent of nature. The wind, the dampness in the air, and the fragrance of grass all felt strangely familiar. Paula placed a cup of tea in his hands. It was a blend he liked. She told him she planned to read to him here today. Vincent grumbled that it was probably another dull story. But Paula assured him it was an adventure tale this time. She was about to mention Ethan had recommended it, but thinking better of it, she said instead that she had heard Vincent liked such stories. She cleared her throat and began reading. The story unfolded under the sunlight, her voice steady and warm. For the first time in a long while, Vincent felt peaceful. His curiosity returned. After a moment of silence, he quietly asked what she looked like. Paula froze. She knew he was staring at her, his gaze unnerving even though his eyes couldn't truly see. Her heart sank. She didn't want him to know, didn't want to answer. Vincent teased her, saying he just wanted to know what the bold and shameless maid looked like. Paula dodged the question by pretending she needed to continue reading. But then, Vincent suddenly reached out and touched her face. Startled, Paula jumped up, trembling. She stammered that the sudden touch had simply scared her. Vincent, on the other hand, was confused. He explained that he just wanted to get a sense of her appearance since he couldn't see. He asked again, what did she look like? Paula, looking down, quietly replied that she was very plain-looking. Vincent pressed her to explain further. Her vague answers only made him more curious. She admitted she was a bit short. He already knew that. She added that her hair reached her chest. It had a slight wave to it. Under her breath, Paula watched as Vincent gently reached out again, his fingers brushing her cheek, trailing along a strand of hair near her ear and then down to the ends. He smiled faintly, remarking that her hair really was softly curled at the tips. He wanted to know more. His gentle touch and devastatingly handsome face made Paula freeze. Her whole body tensed, but she stayed rooted in place. Vincent asked for more details. Anything he could use to build a picture of her in his mind. And in her heart, memories stirred. She remembered being smaller and thinner than other girls. Her hair was rough and dry, the color of dead grass. Her skin had been littered with bruises from her father's beatings. Her eyes were sharp, fierce, almost cracked at the corners, and her freckled nose looked out of place. She had been teased, called names shorty, ugly. Her third sister, Elisa, on the other hand, had always been beautiful. Even Paula had thought so. People adored her. No matter how awful her personality, no one criticized her, only praised her charm. Their father, cruel as he was, had doted on Elisa. But Paula had always been treated like a worthless item. Elisa, like a prized object, was destined to pay a high price for that beauty someday. But Paula? Paula had never been considered worth anything at all. After Paula finished describing herself, or rather, describing her sister Elisa's looks instead, anxiety began to twist inside her chest. A question lingered painfully in her heart. If Vincent ever found out what she really looked like, would he be disgusted too? Would he turn away from her the same way others always had? But Vincent, unaware of her inner turmoil, responded casually. He chuckled and remarked that if what she said was true, then she must be quite a beauty, even if he couldn't picture it. His comment stung, even though he didn't mean it cruelly. Paula knew why his response felt normal, because everything she'd said had been a lie. She hadn't described herself at all. The features she had listed, those belonged to Elisa, not her. Still, she kept the act going, lying again with a forced softness in her voice, saying that she often heard such compliments. But behind those words, her hands instinctively moved to cover her face. Deep inside, she was drowning in pain. She didn't want to feel that sharp sting of rejection again. Even if just one person in her entire life could see her as beautiful, just one, then maybe she could believe it too. Vincent smiled gently, unaware of the storm inside her. He joked that it should be easy to find someone like her. Of course, Paula knew the truth. None of what she told him would help anyone find her. It was all false, just like the image she had painted. Still, Vincent continued confidently. If needed, he would simply ask for the smallest person in the estate, and she'd surely appear. His teasing made her blink in surprise. She looked up at him with mild annoyance and insisted that she wasn't that short. But Vincent didn't let it go. He argued that she absolutely was, and it was only because he was so tall that the difference felt exaggerated. Paula defended herself again, this time sounding a little embarrassed. The air was getting cooler now, and she asked gently if he was feeling cold. Vincent replied that he wasn't. He set down his teacup and surprised her by saying he wanted to take a walk. It was the first time he had taken the initiative to ask for something like that. Pleased, Paula immediately agreed. She rose with a bright smile and carefully offered her arm to help him. Slowly and patiently, she led him forward one step at a time, always glancing back to make sure he was doing all right. As the two walked quietly beneath the trees, Paula smiled warmly and suggested that they could come out like this more often if Vincent enjoyed it. But he quickly declined, saying it wasn't necessary. When she asked why, his hesitation showed. He worried they might run into others, and that would complicate things. But Paula reassured him that the place was isolated. If anyone did come near, she promised to warn him immediately. Vincent considered this for a moment. Then, perhaps swayed by her calm tone or the gentle wind, he changed his mind. He agreed that it was unlikely anyone would show up. The area was tucked away and rarely visited now. In fact, it had once been a favorite place of his childhood, where he, Ethan, and Violet used to spend time together. That name made Paula pause in her steps. Though she didn't turn around, she finally asked something that had lingered in her mind for a while. Who was Violet? There was a short silence behind her, and then Vincent walked up beside her. He leaned closer and told her quietly that Violet was his fiancée. Paula's face filled with surprise. Of course, someone like Vincent was bound to have someone waiting for him. Within seconds, her imagination took off. She assumed it was a romance, full of love. That must be why this woman kept writing letters. Surely she loved him deeply. But Vincent's face turned hard. He told her not to jump to conclusions. Things weren't the way she imagined. He instructed her bluntly, if Violet ever came looking for him, Paula should turn her away. This confused Paula. Why would he want to avoid his own fiancé? Then Vincent revealed the truth. Violet didn't know he had lost his sight. And if she ever found out, she might call off the engagement. Their connection wasn't born from love, but from noble obligations. It was a strategic arrangement between families. To protect their reputations and avoid social damage, they had chosen to keep his condition a secret. Paula listened quietly, now beginning to understand how complex and cold the world of nobles could be. She nodded, showing that she understood. But Vincent had more to say. He told her there was no need to keep comforting him just because she felt bad for him. He had seen through her concern easily. Embarrassed by how easily her intentions had been read, Paula looked away, unwilling to admit anything. He sighed softly and asked if they could continue walking. Just then, a gust of wind swept through the trees, snatching a cloth from Paula's basket and sending it flying. She called out quickly and rushed after it. She thought it would only take a moment, but the wind was strong and carried it far, finally catching it on a tree branch. As she approached the cloth, catching her breath, someone else reached it first. A man with light brown hair stepped out from behind the tree. His expression was kind, and his gaze lingered on her with a quiet amusement. Wordlessly, he handed the cloth back to her. Paula froze. There was something oddly familiar about his eyes. She had never seen this man before, yet she felt like she knew him from somewhere. Then the wind returned playfully, lifting her bangs and exposing the scarred skin on her forehead. Panic rose in her throat. She covered her face quickly, overcome by shame and old wounds that had never fully healed. Through trembling fingers, she apologized again and again, explaining that her appearance was unpleasant. She remembered someone once saying she looked like a curse. And though she had never asked for this face, it had been given to her like a punishment. But then, to her shock, the stranger simply told her she was beautiful. Those words struck her like thunder. No one had ever said that to her before, not with sincerity. Her hands lowered slightly, and her wide, stunned eyes met his. He was still smiling softly, no mockery in his expression. Just calm acceptance. Before she could say anything more, a familiar voice called her name from a distance. It was Vincent. She quickly thanked the stranger and turned to leave, but as she held the cloth again, she felt something hidden inside it. Tucked into the folds was a note, written in golden ink. The message was cryptic, about a longing to travel the world. But when she turned back, the man had vanished. Only the note remained as proof that he had been real. She hurried back to Vincent with questions swirling in her mind. She apologized for being late and began to explain that she had met someone, but before she could finish her sentence, Vincent grabbed her tightly. His voice was trembling, filled with fear. She immediately realized something was wrong. Despite the mild weather, Vincent was soaked in sweat. As if trying to confirm something, he reached out and gently touched Paula's face, then her hand, as if needing proof she was truly there. His voice cracked as he asked her never to leave him alone again. Paula felt his heartbeat pounding against her fingers, strong and frightened. Her guilt swallowed her whole. She kept apologizing again and again. He didn't let go for a long while. Time passed slowly. The sky, once bright, had begun to darken before he finally spoke. His voice was quiet. He said he was tired and asked to go back. As they entered the mansion, they were met with sudden panic. The headmaid rushed to them with an uneasy look. Paula was about to explain the situation when she heard voices calling from the distance. She turned and saw two figures approaching Ethan, and beside him, a stunning young woman with tears shimmering in her eyes. The girl called Vincent's name as if it carried all the weight of her heart. But Vincent didn't move toward her. Instead, he held onto Paula more tightly and whispered into her ear, his voice low and heavy with meaning. It was Violet. His fiancée had finally arrived. Paula stood frozen in place, stunned by what she had just heard. Vincent's fiancée had arrived. Ethan looked awkward and guilty, giving Paula a hesitant wave as if apologizing silently. But the girl who stood before them, Violet, had no eyes for anyone but Vincent. Tears streamed down her face as she walked toward him, her voice trembling with longing. She had missed him deeply. Ethan tried to calm her, gently urging her to take a breath. But Paula noticed something far more urgent. Vincent's hand, still holding hers, had begun to tremble, his grip tightening as if afraid to let go. She realized they couldn't stay there any longer. Without waiting another second, she pulled him by the hand and whispered firmly that they should run. Startled, Vincent let her lead him away. The others watched in stunned silence as the maid and the nobleman disappeared together down the hall. But running could only delay the inevitable. After guiding her master safely back to his room, Paula returned alone to the reception area. There, Violet sat like a doll carved from sugar, so delicate and elegant that one could almost imagine the air around her smelled sweet. Paula, without realizing it, spoke aloud what she was thinking, how breathtakingly beautiful Violet was. She immediately apologized and moved to place the refreshments down. Violet, with warm politeness, spoke first and asked if she was the new maid. Paula introduced herself formally, apologizing for her earlier behavior. But Violet was understanding. She admitted it wasn't Paula's fault, she had simply been too eager to see Vincent. She even added that Ethan had mentioned Paula before and that she seemed just as kind as he described. The unexpected kindness caught Paula off guard. Not only was this woman beautiful, but she was also graceful and considerate. Violet patted the space beside her, inviting Paula to sit. Ethan, in his usual teasing tone, tried to lure her to sit next to him instead. Paula responded with an obvious look of disgust, which amused him further. It wasn't until the headmaid told her to sit that Paula finally obeyed and took her seat. Ethan, still acting flippant, greeted her with an overly cheerful grin. Paula, unimpressed, refused to respond kindly. It became clear soon enough why Violet had come. She wanted to know about Vincent's condition. Ethan leaned over and whispered the truth to Paula. Violet still believed Vincent was recovering from party-related injuries. She didn't know he had gone blind. Curious, Paula asked what his relationship with Violet was. Ethan explained that the three of them, he, Vincent, and Violet, had known each other since they were children. They were friends, bound by years of shared history. Violet once again requested to see Vincent, but the headmaid gently declined. Vincent didn't want her to see him like this. Violet clenched her fists at the refusal. Then she turned, her eyes desperate, and pleaded with Paula instead. She begged her to pass along a message. She said she didn't care what condition Vincent was in, she just wanted to see him. She wanted to see his face, no matter how he looked. Caught between duty and sympathy, Paula looked around for help. But no one stepped in. The head maid sipped her tea in silence. Ethan munched on a biscuit. No one was coming to save her from this emotional request. So, with no other choice, Paula returned to Vincent's room. Vincent had once again hidden under his bedsheets. Paula informed him she had a message to deliver and began imitating Violet's tone despite her embarrassment. Repeating the heartfelt plea made her cheeks burn. Ethan, who had followed behind for entertainment, greeted Vincent cheerfully only to be struck in the face by a pillow the moment he poked his head into the room. Vincent sat up in clear frustration, his mood terrible. He ordered them both to leave. Ethan tried to reason with him. He said he had believed that replying to Violet's letters would keep her away. But Vincent knew her too well. Once she set her mind on something, no one could stop her. Ethan backed away when Vincent reached for another object to throw, ducking behind Paula and loudly reminding Vincent that she was still present. Vincent, who hadn't directed his usual anger at Paula in quite a while, seemed momentarily confused. Meanwhile, Ethan went on teasing, praising Paula's boldness in the hall earlier. He said the way she had grabbed Vincent's hand and run with him was truly moving. Paula, trapped between them, tried to stop Ethan's nonsense. But he kept pushing, saying she had looked so cool, so heroic. His words, his tone, and Paula's discomfort all blended into something Vincent couldn't quite interpret. Strange thoughts began forming in his mind. And then Ethan said something reckless. He confessed that, in that moment, he had almost fallen for Paula. That was the final straw for Vincent. His anger exploded. Paula, desperate to change the subject, quickly mentioned Violet's request. She had said she would wait for him in the garden the next morning. But Vincent refused. He told her not to bother. He wouldn't go. Ethan noted that Violet likely wouldn't leave so easily. It was obvious she had come with strong determination. Vincent clenched his fist in anger and once again ordered them to leave. Outside the room, Paula pushed Ethan away, scolding him. He shrugged helplessly, asking what they should do now. She reminded him that since Violet had come with a firm heart, they needed to calm her down somehow. But Ethan had no ideas either. The next morning, they found Violet near a bed of flowers, her smile soft and radiant, as if blooming alongside the blossoms. But she wasn't waiting for them, she was hoping to see her fiancé. When she heard Vincent wouldn't come, disappointment darkened her face. Paula apologized sincerely. She had tried, again and again, to convince him. But Violet shook her head and said she had been foolish to hope. In her hands, she held a small bunch of flowers. She admitted she had tried to make a bouquet for Vincent, but her efforts had failed. She doubted it would bring him any joy. Seeing Violet's sadness stirred something uncomfortable in Paula. Without hesitation, she offered to help. Her hands moved with practiced grace, arranging the flowers into a neat, beautiful bouquet. Violet stared in admiration, amazed by how effortlessly Paula had done it. Paula explained that she had once sold flowers on the side, so she had learned the skill out of necessity. Violet sighed with a smile and said she envied her. She turned back to Paula and spoke in a soft, pained voice. Perhaps, she said, she had so many flaws that Vincent had grown tired of her, that maybe he didn't trust her anymore. Her fists clenched tightly in her lap, a clear sign of frustration beneath her gentle words. Petals drifted quietly to the ground, and Paula felt more confused than ever. Ethan, now used to Violet's theatrics, gently reminded her that others were watching. Violet quickly apologized and looked down at the ruined bouquet. She asked if Paula could help her make another one. Paula, ever willing, said she'd be glad to. As she picked out fresh flowers, Violet asked her age. Paula told her she was 18. Violet smiled in delight. They were the same age. She confessed that she had always wanted to spend time like this, with girls her own age. She seemed genuinely happy, while Paula, unused to such enthusiasm, blushed deeply and struggled to respond. Soon, the new bouquet was finished. Violet accepted it with gratitude, holding it carefully. Then, she asked if Paula could do her one last favor, deliver the bouquet to Vincent. Paula agreed without hesitation. Though, she noticed, the bouquet was larger than expected. As she tied the bouquet together using the ribbon from her hair, Paula heard Violet softly ask whether she wanted to deliver this bouquet too. But instead of handing it over for delivery, Violet gently held the flowers out to her. These weren't meant for Vincent, these were a gift for Paula. Though she admitted it wasn't anything grand, Violet explained that she wanted to thank Paula for helping her make such a lovely bouquet. Embarrassed but sincere, Violet offered the flowers again, urging Paula to accept them. Despite having sold countless flower arrangements in her life, It was the first time Paula had ever received one as a gift. But then Violet spoke again, unintentionally breaking the mood with her uncertain voice. She apologized, thinking she had said too much, and turned to Paula with an uneasy look in her eyes. Violet asked if Paula, too, believed she should leave, that perhaps it was better to give up on Vincent. Ethan quickly stepped in to calm her down, but Violet seemed desperate, almost like someone drowning, reaching for a final chance. She asked Paula again, this time more gently, for the truth, because Paula was the only one who could actually be near Vincent. Paula hesitated, then quietly admitted that she also hoped Vincent would be willing to meet with Violet. That small answer lit up Violet's face. She was grateful, more than grateful, and said she had now made up her mind. She would not leave until she had seen Vincent with her own eyes. This firm decision only added to the problems, and it certainly didn't bring comfort to Vincent. When he found out, he didn't feel flattered or moved. Instead, frustration consumed him. His emotions began to spiral, and once again, he lost his calm. Ethan didn't take it as seriously. He casually suggested that Vincent should just meet her once. But Vincent snapped at him, clearly annoyed. Ethan, trying to lighten the mood, reminded him that he used to act through situations like this without issue. Just pretend, like before. But Vincent reminded him that those were different times, back before the incident, when he could still make out shapes. Now, it was complete darkness. Still, Ethan tried pushing. He told Vincent that he'd handled far more difficult situations in the past, and it seemed ridiculous to back away now just because of Violet. Their banter became like a typical dog and cat fight, though in the end, Ethan won, at least for now. The real challenge, Ethan said, was making sure Vincent could fake eye contact. He needed to make it look like he was actually looking at Violet. Ethan joked that judging from how accurate Vincent was when throwing things, his sense of direction must be great. He encouraged him to give it a try. To help, he planned to seat Violet directly across from Vincent. And then, practice began. Ethan told Vincent to start by looking at Paula as if she were Violet. But Vincent kept getting it wrong. Sometimes too high, sometimes too low. They couldn't get it right. Eventually, Paula stepped in to gently adjust his head, guiding him to face her properly. Slowly, through quiet repetition, they finally managed to make their gazes line up naturally. Next came the part Vincent hated even more, dialogue practice. Ethan criticized his posture first. He told Vincent to relax a little, maybe cross his legs or lean back in the chair. Vincent awkwardly lifted one leg and waited. Then came the acting. Ethan asked Paula to pretend to be Violet and say what she might say after not seeing Vincent for a long time. Paula hesitated, then mimicked Violet's tone, pretending to ask why Vincent had avoided her. Vincent rolled his eyes. That didn't sound like Violet at all, he said flatly. Ethan agreed and teased Paula, calling her acting hopeless. She tried again, imitating Violet in a slightly flirtatious tone, adding a playful complaint into the mix. But Vincent shut her down instantly, calling it disgusting. Despite the insult, Ethan insisted that she just go with it. She didn't need to be perfect, she just needed to keep practicing. Paula took a breath, then dropped the act completely and spoke from her own heart. She said that she had been so worried about him. Vincent naturally leaned back into the sofa, this time with more ease. He responded by saying that he hadn't had much strength lately, and with all the danger surrounding him, he didn't want to drag her into it. Paula replied that if he truly felt that way, then he should at least write to her more often. She would wait. Those words made Vincent pause. Then he said softly that he hadn't meant to make her worry so much. He admitted he wasn't avoiding her because he didn't care, quite the opposite. His expression, his voice, and even his gaze all softened. Paula smiled and said that would be enough. But the words that came next caught in her throat. She didn't know how to say them, yet she had to. Lowering her head and holding her breath, she stammered out the words, that she missed him. Vincent seemed stunned for a brief moment. Then he asked gently if she really meant it. Paula blinked her eyes open, and through the blurriness, she saw his faint smile. His hands propped up his chin, and his grin carried a mischievous edge. He simply said, "Thank you." Paula's heart jolted. She quickly looked away, realizing she shouldn't be seeing that face. That wasn't meant for her. But her chest ached as her heart pounded wildly, because in that one moment, it felt like she had seen something she wasn't supposed to. Only when Ethan called her did she snap back to reality. He said the practice had been good enough. What mattered now was keeping the actual conversation with Violet short. The longer it went on, the easier it would be to slip up. Violet, he said, would never be the one to end the talk first, so Vincent would need to leave with an excuse like being tired. Now all that remained was the exit. Vincent stood up and said he could practice walking out. Ethan turned to Paula. Her help would be needed again. Paula moved forward and reached out to guide her master. But as soon as she touched his hand, she remembered that smile, his soft "thank you," and her face flushed red with heat. But none of it had actually been said, had it? Was she just imagining things? Vincent, sensing her hesitation, suddenly stopped and gripped her hand. Tighter. He demanded to know why she was hesitating. He told her not to treat him so half-heartedly. If he were to fall, she'd have to catch him. She knew it was impossible. He was much taller, stronger. There was no way she could catch him. Still, he held her hand tightly, making it impossible for her to pull away. And in that strange moment, Paula didn't know what was happening to her, only that something soft, confusing, and unspoken was stirring inside her chest again.